Hello and welcome back to the Transform with Plants podcast. I want to ask you a question. How many diets have you tried in your life? I want you to reflect back on all the different diets you've tried and all the different rules or guidelines that you were taught. And I want you to think about how many of those diets spoke of things like portion control or weighing or measuring your food exactly. Portion size, portion weight, counting calories even. And how many times have you been told that in order to lose weight you need to eat less? Maybe smaller portions, less food. And that left you white knuckling your way through things like hunger and cravings. And then eventually, if you do that, your body is going to let go of its fat stores. We talked last week about why undereating backfires and why this is not a sustainable method for fat loss. And today I want to talk about the alternative, how we can still eat generous portions of food and still be able to lose weight. And this is the model that lets you eat generously, not have to count and measure and weigh and track every single little thing that you put in your body, and you still be able to get into that calorie deficit zone in order to be able to release fat. And that principle is called calorie density, and it's the single most powerful concept that I teach. And once you understand it, you see food in a different way, or at least that's how I saw it when I learned about this principle. And I'm really freaking mad at the diet industry that it took me 20 years, no more, 25 years, maybe 30 years, and I still didn't understand this. Of all of the research that I did into food, all the diets that I tried, every time I was trying to lose weight, I didn't understand this concept. And this is why I think it's really important, and I really want you to understand this. And before I teach you about it, I'm going to start with how I found the calorie density model, because I didn't achieve my goals simply by learning about calorie density and then changing my diet to follow this principle and then losing weight. No, I lost the weight and then I had to go back and understand why. I had to go and do that research and understand the why, because my brain is a very logical brain, and if I need to know the mechanisms behind why things happen, or else my brain is not satisfied. And so I can't just... And I think it's also really important that we understand the why, because when we understand this, we can then make intelligent decisions, and we're not guessing. We're making decisions based on logic, on what we know to be true, rather than just guessing at what we think actually helped us achieve the goal. It's a little bit like, I'm going off on a tangent here, it's a little bit like the keto crowd thinking that carbohydrates are the reason that people put on weight. And so when they take carbohydrates out of their diet, they suddenly see the scale go down. So they think they understand the mechanism in that, oh yes, when I removed carbohydrates, my weight went down, therefore it's the carbohydrates that lead to weight gain. But what they're not understanding is that the actual why underneath what's happening, in that they are now in a calorie deficit because they removed a food group. They're eating less calories. And even when the scale weight goes down, it may not necessarily be body fat, that their body is actually losing glucose weight and with that stored water. And most of the weight that they lose is water. So I think actually having understanding the mechanism as to why whole food plant-based eating or plant-based eating can be so powerful for long-term fat loss, I think it's really, really important. So then it allows you to make very intelligent decisions and actually understand the mechanisms and the why. All right, so for those of you who've been following me for a while, you might have heard my story, but for those of you who are new, I went vegetarian when I was 20, back in about 1994. I just left home, and as a teenager or as a child growing up, I never really liked meat. One of my very first experiences, or one of my very first memories, was me sitting on the grass outside of our home in Hamilton, and I was chewing on a piece of steak, and I remember chew, and I couldn't swallow this damn piece of steak, and I spat it out onto the grass, and I hated it. It was horrible. And I soon made the connection between the animals that I would see in fields around me, because we sort of lived on the edge of Hamilton. It was still, in a suburb, but it was very close to paddocks and things like that. And I remember seeing the cows in the paddocks, and I remember looking in their eyes and seeing a being behind those eyes. And it didn't take me long before I connected the animal to what was on my plate. And I felt very uncomfortable growing up eating animal foods. And I wish that I'd been that kid that had said, I'm not going to eat meat. The ones you see on Instagram who are so adorably cute. But I wasn't. And in my teenage years, I did start experimenting with vegetarian cooking, much to my father's delight. Not. He would come home from work and say, where's the meat? And so I was already experimenting with vegetarianism. And so when I left home at age 20, I went vegetarian. And then at around, I think, age 23, I went vegan for the animals. I'd learned about the dairy industry and the impacts that was having, and I didn't want to be part of it. And I became a vegan animal rights activist back then. And it was also in my 20s that I struggled most with my weight. Initially, I lost a ton of weight when I went vegan. I'm not sure exactly how much because I didn't have a scale, but I remember that my body transformed and people were commenting a lot about how much weight I'd lost. And that was because I really was not putting those high-fat dairy products into my body, the creamy dairy in my coffee or in my cereal every day. No more cheese, no more ice creams, and many of the snack foods that I was eating just fell away as well. But I soon found a way, even while vegan, to put it all back on. Of course, vegan butter, found vegan ice cream, found vegan biscuits, etc. Found ways to make things like cheesecake with coconut cream and tofu, and found ways to make very sort of fatty, rich sauces. And of course, I was still eating, cooking with oils, and I was still eating vegan meats, which are still very calorie dense as well. And I was vegan for about 5 years, and my weight just kept going up and up and up, and I was really struggling with how to bring it back down. But I was vegan for about 5 years, and then, life changes, you start to have a few struggles, and it started to become not quite so important for me anymore, and I slid back to being vegetarian, and then even pescatarian for a short period in my 30s. But I just knew deep down that wasn't who I was. So I kicked my butt, and I dropped the fish, and I went back to being vegetarian with the aim of going back to vegan eventually. And now I'd been thinking about going back to being vegan for some time now, and I'd been hesitant because I was, like a lot of people, scared of what people are going to say, fearing criticism or bullying, because I'd been bullied as a child, and so that was a real self-protection thing there for me. And then I had a melanoma scare in 2017 at the age of 44, and that required 2 operations to remove all of that cancer. And when you are sitting with a diagnosis and 2 operations and the very real possibility that this could come back and actually come back worse, which is what melanoma can do, then suddenly that fear of being judged by someone at a dinner party or, on social media, it didn't matter anymore. And I knew that was the universe kicking me in the butt. That was the universe going, hey, you are supposed to be vegan. Go back to being vegan. And so I made that move back to being vegan immediately. It was right after my second operation in 2018. However, vegan now, 20 years later versus vegan 20 years prior, was a very, very different situation. On the market, there were so many more vegan foods available now, and I'm talking processed foods. I'm not talking about vegan meats because I'd been eating those, for 20 years or so, being vegetarian. But I'm talking about the vegan processed foods, the biscuits, the chocolate, oh my God, the ice cream, the donuts, the croissants, the anything that you can get with dairy in it, you can get vegan. And as a result of that, my weight never changed when I went vegan again, and neither did my health. My health didn't really change either, although I thought I was doing a good thing for my health, and I probably still was. But what it did, that experience, it sent me down a rabbit warren of exploring the link between diet and cancer specifically, because my mother also had cancer at the time. She had myeloma. And I was told to watch the Forks Over Knives documentary, and so I did, and that's where I found the whole food plant-based movement. That's where I found the experts like Essel Stern and T. Colin Campbell, and I was genuinely excited. And this is where I started to develop a fire in my belly. This is where I started to develop that idea of being a vegan coach. And I decided that I wanted to help people adopt a healthy vegan diet. And that was going to be my way of helping the animals and the planet, because I no longer wanted to be an activist on the street. I just didn't want to put myself in that situation anymore. It was exhausting. And so I wanted to help people transition in a way that left them feeling great, feeling healthy and losing weight and having great health outcomes, because I knew that if they got great health outcomes by doing this, then it would stick for them. And then I would be doing my activism part. So that's when I decided to study plant-based nutrition and start this business. And as I was starting out, I wanted to create a short program, like a short set of, like a short, I call it my reset now. I call it my Plant Power Reset. It was a different name way back. I think I called it a cleanse, but I basically just wanted a short 3-week program that people could actually pick up and follow, and as a result get great results because they're following these recipes. So I started creating these recipes. They're all whole foods, no oil, no processed ingredients, half the plate full of vegetables. And this is when I built that first program. And as I was building it, of course, I was testing out all the recipes. I wanted to make sure that they were filling, that they were delicious, and that other people would enjoy them too. And in the process of testing all of this out, guess what? The weight fell off me, because I hadn't been whole food plant-based up until that point. I had been still just eating a lot of processed foods and cooking with oils. When I say processed foods, I'm talking, the occasional snacks, bringing home bouja, or little bags of nuts, or cooked in oil, or cooking with oil even. And I was still cooking with a lot of plant-based meats, and so I still had these processed and very calorie dense foods in my life up until the point that I was testing this program out. And so as I was doing it, I was putting myself through it, and I had really great results without trying to, without tracking, without counting. And I wasn't doing it for the weight loss, I was doing it for my health. This was me stepping into being whole food plant-based as a commitment to myself. And with the results that I achieved, it wasn't just the weight loss. Like, I lost about the last 6 to 7 kilos that I had really struggled to lose through my 30s and 40s. And now here I was at age 46, and it was just melting off me. And I think I was in perimenopause. I was starting that process of perimenopause too. And it wasn't just the weight. Like, my skin cleared up, my sinuses cleared up, my digestion normalized. What else? My energy went through the roof. Brain fog just disappeared. I was suddenly able to think clearly again. And I had such a profound result, but it was the weight loss that people started to come to me for help. I didn't want to be a weight loss coach to start with, but everyone was just coming to me for weight loss. And so that is why I decided to become a weight loss coach. And for me, at first, I didn't fully understand why this had worked for me so well. I couldn't articulate the science of why. I knew that I was eating more nutritious foods. I knew that I was taking the oil out was going to have an impact, but I didn't really understand it. It was only afterwards I had to then go and dig into the research to understand why, because as I said, my brain needs to understand the why, because I need to then, if I'm teaching this to other people, I then need to be able to articulate this properly. And what I found was the calorie density model. And it was like the lights suddenly turned on for me. It just explained why. It explained why this works so well. And it gave me something that I could then continue to understand properly. And it just made so much sense. I had been eating normal volumes of food. In fact, I'd been eating quite a lot of food, and I'd been able to lose that weight easily. I wasn't fighting hunger or cravings, and I felt genuinely very full and satisfied. And it was wonderful, and I felt so much healthier at the same time. And I genuinely liked the food as well. And it's because I was eating foods that were very naturally low in calorie density and very high in nutrient density. My body was getting everything it needed, volume and fiber, as well as satisfaction, while also being naturally in a deficit. How I was eating was naturally lowering the calories I was putting in my body every single day, and that's what my body needed in order to be able to release the excess fat that I was carrying. And I said I couldn't explain it before, but I can now, and that's what we're doing today. So let me explain to you calorie density if you haven't heard about this before. So calorie density is simply the number of calories in a given weight of food, and we usually measure it per pound. Excuse me. Get rid of the clag in my throat. So we're measuring how many calories are in 1 pound of food, and every food sits on a scale, and I'm going to show you my screen. So if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, you'll be able to see this screen. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you grab a copy of my weight loss guide, because you'll see this calorie density model inside of my weight loss guide. Okay, so here we go. Here is calorie density. You should be able to see that properly on your screen. Yes, there we go. Okay, so at one end of the scale, right down the left-hand side here, we have non-starchy vegetables. Now, non-starchy vegetables are around 100 to 200 calories per pound. And you can eat you actually have to eat an enormous amount of vegetables in order to get enough calories into your day. If you were only eating vegetables, say if you were eating a raw diet, for example, and you were only eating vegetables, you would have to eat mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of food in order to get in enough calories. It would be hard to do. Your digestion would complain. It would be very hard to do. So you can still eat a really decent volume of food here and still take in very few calories. And why? It's because vegetables are mostly water and fiber. They are extremely rich in micronutrients too, which is great. You can eat a ton of vegetables, not take in very many calories, and be delivering your body a huge amount of micronutrients that are essential for your health. Now, fruit is the next at around 200 to 300 calories per pound. It's still is mind-boggling to me today that people think that fruit is not good for weight loss. Come on, fruit is so low on the calorie density scale. Again, you'd have to eat mountains and mountains and mountains of fruit in order to get into a calorie surplus. And your digestion would probably not handle this very well. You would struggle to fit all that food into your body. So fruit sits at around 200 to 300 calories per pound. It's still very low in calories. It's still very high in water and fiber as well, and also a great source of micronutrients. Then we have next on the scale is potatoes at around 400 calories per pound. And then we've got whole grains at around 500, that's rice, oats, other grains. Then we have legumes at about 600 calories per pound. And legumes come with significant protein and fiber, which means they keep you very full and satisfied for a long period of time. And then we have things like tofu and wholemeal pasta, which are still moderately processed foods, but we consider them orange light foods in the plant-based world. They are around 600 calories per pound as well. So they're not terrible for weight loss. People think that you can't have too much tofu or pasta when you're trying to lose weight. No, because these foods are still rich in water and they still contain their fiber as well. So they are actually great weight loss foods. And then we start to move up the scale. And you'll see I've got a green line here, which is at the 600 calories per pound mark, and I'll explain why later. That's if you're watching, watching on video, that is. Now, then we go up the scale. We start with avocado at around 700 calories per pound. Not terrible, but, caution. And then we start moving up. And you'll see here that all animal foods sit above that 600 calories per pound mark. Eggs at 700, meat at around 1,100. And then you've got things like cheese at 1,700, butter at 3,200. And so this is why anybody who is promoting eating animal foods to lose weight is usually also talking about things like tracking and measuring and weighing and counting and portion control. And the reason why is because these foods, these animal foods, are very calorie dense. They do not contain fiber, they do not contain water, and they are high in fat. So the calorie density is very high. So you have to control the amount that you eat, because it is easy to overeat calories when you include animal foods in your diet. This is one of the core reasons why, if you want to lose weight, just get rid of animal foods, right? It just means that you don't have to weigh, measure, count anything. Now, dried foods. We start to move up and we've got things like dried fruits, dates, and then we've got bread and flour that sit at around 1,500. So dried fruits are about 1,200, dried fruits and vegetables, that is, around 1,200 calories per pound. Bread and flour at around 1,500 calories per pound. So the more you remove water from a food, the more calorie dense it becomes. So then we move up to our little fat bomb of cheese at about 1,700. And then we've got things like cereals and popcorn and sugar and crackers. These more processed foods sit at about 1,800 calories per pound. And then we move up and we've got nuts and seeds, extremely healthy for us, rich in fiber, yes, but also rich in fat at around 2,800 calories per pound. And it's extremely easy to overeat calories when you are snacking on nuts. Think about how nuts are packaged in nature. They come in a very hard shell, and it takes a lot of effort to actually get those calories out. And you'd probably burn those calories with all the effort of just trying to get the calories out of the shell, right? So, but now it's a very different situation. Now they come already shelled in big bags, often doused with oil. They are a fat bomb. So if you want to include nuts and seeds in your diet, and I'm not suggesting that you take them out, you just need to include them with awareness, knowing how calorie dense they are. Then we move up. We've got things like chocolate, butter, margarine, 3,000 to 3,200 calories per pound. And then at the very top of the scale, we have oil. Oil at 4,000 calories per pound. That is 40 times more calorie dense than vegetables. You could eat a whole pound of vegetables, which would fill your belly, and that's a huge volume of food, and only be eating, say, around 100 to 150 calories. But you could cook those vegetables in 1 tablespoon of oil, and then suddenly double those calories. And that oil would not change the volume of that food at all. It does nothing to change the satiety or improve the satiety of that meal. It's just a huge whack of calories in a very small package that your stomach hardly notices, but your backside does. So oil is the single most calorie dense substance that you can put in your body. Just 1 tablespoon is 120 calories, and add that to your meals over and over, and suddenly you've got way more calories in your day than you actually realized. They're just invisible calories, and in something in a package so small that you don't even notice it. So one of the best things that you can do is remove oil from your cooking. It's just that when I removed oil, my diet was already, pretty healthy. Even though I was eating white flour, even though I was still including faux meats and faux cheeses, my diet was still rich in fruits and vegetables, and mostly whole in very many other ways. But removing those calorie-dense processed meats and cheeses, which sit roughly at the same place as animal meats and cheeses on the calorie density scale, and removing oils from my diet, and removing some unnecessary snacks that, of course, I don't need. That was the big change for me. And so it's not about eating less food. It's about eating more of the foods that fill you up on fewer calories. And Dr. Rolls at Penn State has spent decades researching this. In her work on Volumetrics, this is the science of eating by volume rather than calorie counting. Her work shows consistently that people naturally eat a similar weight of food every single day, not a similar number, not a similar number of calories, a similar weight of food. Which means that when you, which means that when the food you eat is lower in calorie density, you eat the same satisfying amount or weight of food, but take in significantly fewer calories. Your body doesn't actually know that you've eaten less calories. You still feel full and satisfied. And her research also showed that when people focus on foods that are below 600 calories per pound, weight loss becomes far, far easier. Right? You can eat as much food as you want. I'm going to preface that because we're going to talk more about hunger and fullness in next week's episode. You can overeat, but you can still eat generous portions of food and not have to weigh and measure everything when you focus on foods that are 600 calories per pound or less. And that is the mechanism. This is why whole foods plant-based eating works so brilliantly for fat loss, because you are not restricting yourself. You're not restricting the volume of food that you're eating. You're still eating generous portions and feeling full and satisfied for long periods of time between eating. It's the food that is structured differently, and that's why it's full of fiber, it's full of water. And you'll notice here that all of the foods below 600 calories per pound are plants. None of them are animal foods. None of them are processed foods. We have a couple of minimally processed here, with being tofu and whole wheat pasta. But most of them are whole plant foods. So, it's brilliant. Once I understood this, like, everything just fell into place. And here's something many people don't think about too. I just want to add this for context. And it's about what happens when we dry food. So I talked a little bit about dried foods before. But here's what happens when you cook foods and how it can impact the calorie density of a food. Every time you're removing water from a food, you are concentrating the calories into a smaller volume. So take a potato, for example. If you boil or steam a potato, it's still relatively low in calorie density, around 400 calories per pound cooked. And you are adding water to that potato. But you take that same potato, you don't add the water, you dry it out. You bake it, you chop it up into lots of little chips, and you put it in the air fryer and you fry it, air fry it, even without water. What you're doing is you're increasing the surface area of that potato, and you're drying out more and more and more of that water. The potato shrinks. Now you have the same calories in that potato. The calories don't change, but you've got a much smaller potato. And that means, the reason this is important, it means that you have to eat more of the potato. You have to eat more potatoes in order to feel full and satisfied. And this is how you can end up inadvertently eating more calories than you realize. And of course, then if you go adding oil to it, well, then you're just adding more fat bomb to that as well, and way more calories once again. And similar principle with oats. So wet oats, for example, cooked with water or plant milk, these are low in calorie density. They're satisfying and they're filling. But you take those same oats and you now bake them into a bar or a cookie, say for breakfast, instead of having wet oats if you want to eat on the run. And I've seen some people do this. They just want to have something easy that they can pick up and take with them on the way to work. But suddenly, because you're taking out all of the water, you're drying those oats out, you're eating a far more calorie dense food. And that food, now you need more oats in order to feel full and satisfied. It doesn't fill you up the same way, so you end up eating more calories. And this is why I always say the closer that food is to the whole natural state, the better it works for weight loss. And the more water-rich that food is, the more you're adding moisture to that food, water to that food, the better it is for weight loss. The more you suck that water out or you remove fiber, the worse that food becomes for fat loss. And it's not because processed foods are morally wrong or, they are not, processed foods themselves are not necessarily great for our health. And there's nothing morally wrong with them, but the processing of the food actually changes the calorie density and our satiety response. It just means that weight loss then becomes far harder if we are including these foods in our diet. And that's not to say you can't. You can intentionally, occasionally, but when you focus mostly on whole foods, weight loss does become far, far, far easier. And now I've had the question about smoothies too. Most of you will see that on the cover of my podcast, I am holding a green smoothie. I know some people are really worried about smoothies. We have heard that blending food spikes our blood sugar more and that liquid calories don't fill us up in the same way. And I do want to address this because I don't see this. Blending food in terms of a smoothie does not remove the fiber. And studies have shown that it actually distributes the fiber differently through the food. Research shows that it can actually improve the fiber's effect on blood glucose, actually lowering the blood glucose spikes that people get. But where the concern actually comes from when it comes to blending food or liquid calories is actually more from juicing, where we're removing the fiber and where we're left with concentrated sugar calories. So smoothies themselves keep the fiber intact. And in his book, How Not to Diet, Dr. Michael Greger looks at the effect of blended foods on weight loss. And what he found was that people who were drinking smoothies tended to eat more calories, but people eating soups, blended soups, tended to not. And so he was looking at, okay, well, maybe it's not actually the blending of the food. Let's look at why else this might be. And what he came back with, or what the research was indicating, was the speed at which we eat. And the faster we eat a food, the more likely we are to overeat, because we're now bypassing. If we eat it too fast, our fullness signals are not reaching our brain in time. So he surmised that perhaps with soups, because the food is hot, people are eating it slower. Whereas with smoothies, they are cold and perhaps people are drinking them really fast. So I would like to say to you, if you are going to have a smoothie, make sure it's huge, right? Make sure it's a big one. It's got lots of vegetables in it. Like mine, I fill it up 3/4 or so with spinach before I add the fruit in on top. And I blend it with water only. I don't add plant milk in here. And I just use some flax seeds for my omega-3 fats. I don't go adding things like peanut butter or any of those other calorie-rich foods. So it's very low in calorie density, but it's high in volume, so it keeps me nice and full and satisfied. It's rich in micronutrients, so I feel amazing. Keeps me satisfied for long periods of time, and I drink it slowly. Clearly. I've barely taken a sip. So, don't fear smoothies. Don't fear smoothies. I've just seen a question come through from Alan. How do you feel about wrapping a spud in a damp paper towel and nuking it for 6 minutes? That sounds good to me. If you're keeping that potato whole, it retains most of its water because you're not increasing the surface level. I don't know if you need to wrap it in I don't know if you need to wrap it in a damp paper towel, but if that helps retain some of the water, then all good. Sounds good to me. Okay. Okay, and I wanted to just make a comment about juicing as well. So juicing takes away the fiber. And I want you to think about how many oranges, for example, it might take to give you a cup worth of orange juice. It might take, 4 or 5 oranges, maybe more. And now I want you to think about eating those oranges, right? You'd struggle. You might be able to, you'd feel full and satisfied after one. You might be able to get to two, but you certainly wouldn't be able to eat all the same amount of oranges that it would take to give you that one glass of orange juice. Yet you are still getting the same amount of calories. And so this is why juicing is not ideal for weight loss. Keep juicing for, I say, medicinal purposes. For example, Chris Beat Cancer uses juicing as a medicinal purpose, a way to over deliver nutrients to a sick body. And I know that many other practitioners or people who help with specific diseases actually use juicing strategically for their clients, and particularly where people might have digestive issues, juicing can be helpful to get nutrients and calories into the body without the fibre. But for weight loss, just steer clear of juices, even whole juices. Keep it for a once in a while treat, or for medicinal purposes if you are really trying to deliver your body nutrients without the fibre. When I came back from Bali, for example, and I had barley belly, not this recent time, but last year, I turned to juicing because I was really trying to take fibre out of my digestive system for a while, because it was so upset. Every time I would eat something, it would just go straight through me, and it was not pleasant. And so I still needed calories and I still needed nutrients, and so that's where things like coconut water and juicing was actually very, very helpful. But I wanted to get back onto solid food, or real food and real fiber, as quickly as possible. Okay, so juicing, not ideal for fat loss either, so it's very calorie dense. Okay, so how do we put this all together? How do we put this principle of calorie density into a plate, into a meal that you can just turn off the thinking, turn off the overthinking? This is what I wanted to do, and I call this my plant-powered plate. I'll just change my screen here. I call this my plant-powered plate. Just an easy plate building method that takes the guesswork out of building a healthy meal, that easily gets you into a calorie deficit without the overthinking. Okay, this is my plate here, for those of you who can see on screen. I'll talk you through my plant acronym in a moment, but essentially what we have is half a plate of non-starchy vegetables and or fruit. So those very low calorie dense foods, they take half of your plate. And then over on the right hand side, we've split that half into two. So a quarter of that plate is potatoes and or grains, whole grains. So this is our complex carbohydrates. It's our brown rice, it's our quinoa, whole grain pasta, sweet potatoes, it's regular potatoes, it's corn, it's oats. These are our energy foods. They are satisfying, they fuel our body and our brain. They are in their whole form. So they sit at a moderate calorie density, around 400 to 500 calories per pound. So extremely good for fat loss. I don't know why people say that grains and potatoes are evil. Like, a fear of carbs is one of the biggest myths that we have inherited from diet culture. It's just BS. Please do not be scared of carbohydrates. Your body runs on carbohydrates. The human body runs on carbohydrates. So we need this, but we need them in whole form so that we are not giving ourselves a huge rush of glucose all at once that our body just can't cope with. We're giving ourselves a slow drip of steady energy throughout the day. And then we move on to the other quarter of the plate, which is legumes. So beans, lentils, chickpeas, edamame, tempeh, tofu. These are our protein-rich plant foods. And here is something I want you to hear, and that protein is not the center of the plate in this model. It is a quarter of the plate, because you are getting protein from all of these foods that are on this plate. Every single plant food contains every single essential amino acid. essential amino acids, i.e. the amino acids are building blocks of protein. They are the ones, and the essential ones are the ones that we need to consume because our body doesn't produce them naturally. They are created by plants. They are not created by animals. Animals, especially farm animals, the ones that people eat, they need to eat their protein too. They do not eat meat. A cow does not eat meat. A cow eats plants, it eats grass, it eats hay, and it gets all the protein it needs from those plants. They are just like us. They need to eat their essential amino acids too. So we can go directly to the source. It is far more energy efficient for us to eat the plants than it is for us to feed a shit ton of plants to an animal and then kill that animal. We waste so much energy, so many calories, so much land space. We kill our environment doing this. We do not need to get protein from animal sources. We're also destroying lives. These are real creatures, living creatures. And it's horrible what we do to them. If you haven't watched documentaries like Dominion, just go and I dare you to watch half an hour. I couldn't last half an hour. I was bawling my eyes out and angry with the world, and I had to stop. I'm getting emotional now just thinking about it. So, plants, the original source of protein. Turn to your plants. But legumes are the protein-rich foods. And if you're including legumes on your plate, you are virtually guaranteeing that you'll get your protein needs met. Now, if for some reason you have higher protein needs and you do need to calculate your protein needs, then that's totally fine. You may want to make this half of your plate instead of a quarter of your plate. That's okay too. Some people will need slightly higher protein because they might be athletes, or they might be trying to stand, wanting to stand on a bodybuilding stage, wanting to build huge muscles and stand on a bodybuilding stage, or they might be seniors who are trying to recover muscle after years of being sedentary. Your protein needs, if somebody's given you a protein target, that's okay. You can still get all the protein you need from plants. It's just about manipulating that plate and perhaps having more protein-rich foods like tofu and tempeh, maybe even seitan, which is not technically a whole food, but it's still not terrible, and it is a great rich source of protein. Okay, and then I also say, amping up the flavor. We want to make sure that our food is tasty. You've got to make sure that all of these legumes, these potatoes and grains and vegetables, you want to make sure that they're all tasty. And you can do that with things like herbs and spices and dressings and sauces. And we can still do this in a very calorie dilute way. It doesn't have to be very calorie dense flavorings that we add to our food. And then the last little bit is the tiny little bit of fat. We want to make sure that our fats, our whole plant fats, are a small part of our plate. Healthy fats are important, especially our omega-3s. They're important for fat-soluble vitamins and hormone health. Fats do have an important role. But here's the thing that I want you to understand. Fat is the most calorie-dense macronutrient at 9 calories per gram versus 4 calories per gram for both protein and carbohydrate. And whole food plant fats, nuts, seeds, avocado, nuts and seeds, as we looked at, sit at around 2,800 calories per pound. Avocado is not so bad, 700 calories per pound. But we want to make sure that we're using these sparingly. A little bit goes a very long way in terms of calories. So we want to keep that fat small. And I say for avocado, per meal is around a decent, serving to aim for is around a quarter of an avocado, or around 1 tablespoon of nuts or seeds per meal. And when you stick to roughly that guideline, you're still keeping your calories low. You're not inadvertently adding way more calories to your very calorie dilute meal and then throwing yourself into a calorie surplus. And I have an acronym for this. I call it the Plant Powered Plate, and PLANT is the acronym. This is how you can remember it, because I'm the plant power coach and everything I do is plant powered. So that's why I wanted this acronym. I think it just works really well. So the P is your potatoes and whole grains. So it's your starch-based foods, and that's a quarter of a plate. You've got your legumes. L is legumes, and that's the quarter of a plate. The A is the amping up the flavor with herbs, spices, condiments, dressings, etc. Then the N is non-starchy vegetables and all the fruit, which is half a plate. And then the T is that tiny bit of fat. So that makes it really simple for you to remember. And if you haven't seen that on screen, make sure that you grab a copy of my weight loss guide. I've got a link in the show notes here for you. I've given you all of the visuals there, plus that acronym, and so it's very, very easy for you to follow. All right, and over time, this becomes very instinctive. You stop thinking about it, and it just starts to become very natural. When I think about making a meal today, just following that basic principle is so easy. I don't have to worry about how many calories am I having? How is my plate structured? Am I meeting all my nutritional needs? Right? I just follow that basic structure, and I know I'm fine. And I want to address something directly, because there are a lot of models out there, like calorie counting, macro tracking, intermittent fasting, low carb, keto, point systems. They all claim to work. And in the short term, most of them can produce some results. So why calorie density? Why is this model, I'm calling it superior, over any of those? And there's 3 reasons. 1, it does not require precision to work. You do not need to hit a specific number. You do not need to track in an app. You do not need to weigh or measure your food. You just need to understand the principle and build the meals accordingly. Just follow the plant-powered plate. That makes it far more sustainable than any system that requires constant measuring and tracking, blah-de-blah-de-blah. You get bored of that. I say, if you can't see yourself doing it every single day for the rest of your life till you're 105, because all of us plant-powered people, we're going to live that long, then don't do it. You need to lose weight in a way that is sustainable, that you do not have to obsess over every single day. That was one of the reasons I kept falling off track, is because everything was so freaking hard. You want to work smarter, not harder. We've got to take the effort out. 2, it works with our hunger, not against it. Because we're eating high volume, we're eating lots of fibre. We feel genuinely satisfied after eating. We're not white knuckling our way through hunger and cravings. Cravings and hunger actually settle down. You're not fighting against your biology. Your body is actually getting what it needs in terms of that volume and that fibre. So hunger and your hunger hormones, they stay regulated. And remember the last episode, we talked about that restriction and rebound cycle. That happens when our body is feeling deprived. This model removes that deprivation entirely. Kevin Hall's research on energy balance shows that a calorie deficit is the mechanism of fat loss, and the body must burn more energy than it takes in. But he noticed himself that the way people achieve and sustain that deficit matters enormously. A deficit achieved through hunger and restriction is far harder to maintain than one that is achieved through food composition. He actually put keto, like high fat, low carb keto versus low fat, high carb, whole food, plant-based to the test. And he said in a calorie controlled environment, each camp lost exactly the same amount of weight. When each camp was told to just eat until they felt comfortably satisfied, he noticed that the keto crowd ate 500 to 700 calories more per day, and the whole food plant-based camp lost a lot more weight on far less calories. 3, eating this way improves your health as it improves your body composition. Every other fat loss model focuses on the number. Calorie density, when applied through whole foods, it actually improves your gut microbiome, it improves your cholesterol, it improves your blood pressure, it improves your energy, it improves your skin, your sinuses, your brain fog. Your brain operates so much clearer, your inflammation levels drop, You're delivering way more micronutrients to your body, far less inflammatory foods. You're not just getting lighter, you're getting healthier. And that means your results come with a body that functions better, which makes everything else easier. It makes staying consistent easier because you feel so much better. Suddenly things make sense. That's what happened for me. All right, team. Alan, I'm just reading back over your comment here. By the way, anybody listening on replay, watching on YouTube, or listening on the podcast, come and join my Facebook group, Plant-Based Health and Weight Loss Support. You get to drop comments for me, just like Alan has here. And Alan was just saying about the potato. It steams the potato. Thank you, Alan. And Alan is one of our recipe contributors in the group. He's been dropping lots of recipes in there just recently. So if you're looking for some more recipe inspiration, definitely come and join our group. I drop in recipes there. So does Alan. I'm going to encourage everybody to drop their recipes in there too, because I think sharing is caring, and let's all be caring. It's what our community is for. Let's support each other. All right, team. If anyone else has some questions, please drop them in the comments, and I'll come back to them at the end as well. So let me give you the key takeaways before we wrap up today. 1, calorie density is the number of calories per pound of food. Excuse me. The lower the calorie density, the more food that you can eat on that. And let me start that again. The lower the calorie density, the more food you can eat on the same number of calories. Non-starchy vegetables are around 100 calories per pound versus oil, which is around 4,000 calories per pound. All right, and everything else sits somewhere in between. Building meals on the lower end of the scale, 600 calories per pound, is the easiest and most satisfying way to be able to hit that calorie deficit and release body fat. By far the easiest way than anything else you will try. And believe me, I've tried lots of things. Removing water from food will concentrate the calories. Drying, baking, frying foods, the more you cut a food and dry it as well, the more calorie dense that food becomes. They are far more calorie dense when dried than their whole, water intact counterparts. So keep those foods as natural as possible. Keep them in their whole state as much as possible. Smoothies keep the fibre intact and are fine for fat loss. Just make sure that you drink them slowly, just like you would a soup, a hot soup. Juice is what removes the fibre, and that is the meaningful distinction. Juicing is not good for weight loss, whereas smoothies keep that fibre. The plant-powered plate, that gives you that visual framework. And remember the acronym PLANT. That's why I call it the plant-powered plate. P, potatoes and grains. L, legumes. A, amping up the flavour. N, non-starchy vegetables or fruit. T, tiny bit of fat. I want you to remember that. Follow that plate. You don't need to track. You don't need to count. You just need to build the plate. And then focus on consistency over perfection. This is a framework that you can follow imperfectly for years, and it beats having to follow a very strict and rigid plan for 3 weeks. It beats counting and tracking. When you understand calorie density, you can still include the occasional treat in your diet. And you can still energy balance by making sure that you eat plenty of other foods that go with it. For example, if you wanted a pizza, have pizza on half the plate and then the other half of the plate, tons of vegetables. If you wanted to have a donut, have a donut and then fill up on tons of vegetables. Or fill up on tons of vegetables first and then have a little bit of donut. Right, so you can still energy balance. You can eat intelligently is what I will say. You can make intelligent decisions and still be in a calorie deficit. And if you are listening back on podcast, like I said, grab my weight loss guide. Grab a copy of that if you don't already have a copy of it, because that will give you the visuals, the visual of the calorie density scale, and it will give you the visual of my plant-powered plate as well. So the link is in the show notes. Just download it, stick it on your fridge, whatever you want, put it on your phone. You can actually save this guide onto your phone if you want to carry it with you everywhere. You can save it into a books app, or I save all of my guides into an app called GoodNotes. And that way on my iPad, I can make little scribbling, especially if I want to update it. I go through and just put it on the iPad and scribble all over it, and then I go into Canva and update it again. So yeah, you can keep a copy on your phone. That gives you that quick reference anytime you need it. Alrighty, so if this episode has landed for you, then I'd love for you to share it with someone who's still stuck in that restriction mindset, or stuck in calorie counting or macro counting. This is a message that they need to hear. And I think once people understand this principle, it changes how you look at food. It changes what you understand about food and weight loss and what is really important versus what's not. Okay, and if you are done trying to figure this out on your own, if you're ready to get some support, then book a free discovery call with me. The link is also in the show notes. Let's have a real conversation. We'll just look at where you're at right now. We'll look at where you want to be, and we'll look at what might be standing in the way of you getting to your goals. And we'll come up with 3 things that you can be focusing on that are going to make a meaningful difference for you. So we'll look at that gap. What is that gap? What is it that you really need to focus on? And oftentimes it's not really what you think. Sometimes we think we need a better plan, we need a better meal plan. Sometimes it's actually something quite different. And this is what we can pick up in that discovery call. And then we can talk about whether working together makes sense. No pressure, just come and have a conversation. And if you're part of my Facebook group, you get a free consult call with me anyway. So if you're part of that, if you're part of my group and you haven't had your free consult yet, I encourage you to book that in so we can actually look at where you're at and help move you forwards. Okay, team, it was wonderful chatting to you. I will see you again next week. Ciao for now.